The missile trail. In a warehouse outside Tehran, technicians carefully pack precision components into crates marked as agricultural irrigation equipment. The components are guidance systems, propulsion parts, and targeting computers that will transform crude rockets into weapons capable of striking cities hundreds of kilometers away. In 3 weeks, these components will arrive at their destination through a route that crosses 7 countries and involves dozens of front companies. The recipients are not Iranian military forces. They are proxy militias who will use these weapons to attack civilian populations, military bases, and critical infrastructure across the Middle East. This is not speculation. This is what Secret Elite discovered was happening beneath the surface of international commerce. This is Operation Desert Serpent, the story of how an international coalition dismantled the largest ballistic missile proliferation network ever uncovered and prevented weapons capable of mass destruction from reaching those eager to use them. The investigation began with a missile strike that should have been impossible. A proxy militia operating in a conflict zone launched a ballistic missile at a neighboring country's capital. The missile demonstrated guidance accuracy that far exceeded the group's known capabilities. It struck within 50 meters of its intended target, a government building in a densely populated urban area. 43 civilians died. Over 200 were wounded. Intelligence analysts examining debris recovered from the strike site discovered something alarming. The guidance components were not improvised or locally manufactured. They were precision systems produced by entities connected to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The same component were Honandan in missiles operated by Iranian military forces. Someone was systematically transferring advanced ballistic missile technology to non-state actors. Secret Elite activated a comprehensive investigation within 72 hours. What they discovered was a proliferation network of unprecedented sophistication. The Islamic Republic had built a covert supply chain that moved missile components from production facilities in Iran through a network of front companies, transshipment points, and corrupt officials across 3 continents. The network exploited gaps in international sanctions enforcement, manipulated legitimate shipping channels, and employed counter-surveillance techniques that had evaded detection for over 5 years. The scale was staggering. Intelligence revealed that the network had transferred components sufficient to construct or upgrade over 400 ballistic missiles. Recipients included proxy militias in Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. Some components had reached groups in Africa and South America. The proliferation was transforming regional conflicts into potential mass casualty events, and the network was preparing its largest shipment yet. A cargo vessel was being loaded at a port facility controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. The manifest listed machine parts and industrial equipment. The actual cargo included guidance systems for 75 ballistic missiles, propulsion components, and mobile launcher parts. The shipment would dramatically enhance the strike capabilities of multiple proxy forces simultaneously. The destination was a port in East Africa, where the components would be divided and transported overland to various recipients. The transfer was scheduled to occur in 19 days. Think about what this means. Ballistic missiles are not precision weapons in the hands of untrained operators. They strike general areas, not specific targets. When aimed at cities, they kill civilians indiscriminately. When equipped with chemical or biological warheads, they can cause casualties in the thousands. The Islamic Republic was providing these capabilities to groups that had demonstrated willingness to target civilian populations, groups that operated outside any legal framework, groups that answered to no electorate and faced no consequences for atrocities. This was not conventional arms trading. This was the industrialization of terror. Secret Elite assembled a task force representing 15 nations, intelligence directors, naval commanders, sanctions enforcement specialists, and diplomatic liaisons gathered at a classified facility. The complexity of the operation required capabilities that no single nation possessed. The network's structure was revealed through months of intensive intelligence work. In Tehran, a division of the Revolutionary Guard coordinated all proliferation activities. They maintained relationships with front companies across multiple countries. They controlled the technical specifications that determined which components were shipped to which recipients. They managed the financial flows that sustained the entire operation. In Dubai, a trading company served as the primary commercial interface. The company conducted legitimate business that provided cover for illicit transactions. Its executives had connections to the Revolutionary Guard, but maintained plausible deniability through layers of intermediaries. Financial records showed transactions totaling over $700 million over 5 years. In Malaysia, a transshipment hub redirected cargo from its apparent destination to its actual recipients. Containers would arrive labeled for delivery to Southeast Asian companies, then be relabeled and redirected to African or Middle Eastern ports. Corrupt customs officials facilitated the process. In Turkey, a logistics network arranged overland transportation from Mediterranean ports to conflict zones. The network used commercial trucking companies, some witting and some unwitting participants in the smuggling operation. Routes changed regularly to avoid detection. In Sudan, a distribution point divided incoming shipments for delivery to various proxy forces. The facility operated under the protection of local officials who received substantial payments. Security was provided by personnel with connections to multiple armed groups. In Lebanon, technical advisors from the Revolutionary Guard supervised the assembly and deployment of delivered components. They trained local personnel, maintained quality control, and reported back to Tehran on operational effectiveness. Each node of the network presented unique operational challenges. The Tehran Coordination Center was beyond direct intervention. Operations within Iranian territory would require capabilities and authorities that were not available. The objective would be to disrupt the network's external operations so comprehensively that the Coordination Center became irrelevant. The Dubai Trading Company operated in a jurisdiction with complex relationships to all parties involved. The United Arab Emirates maintained economic ties with Iran while also participating in international sanctions. Intervention required diplomatic negotiations at the highest levels. The Malaysia transshipment hub was embedded in legitimate port operations. Identifying illicit containers among thousands of daily shipments required intelligence penetration that had taken years to develop. The Turkey logistics network had connections to officials who might warn targets of impending operations. Any intervention would need to account for potential compromise. The Sudan distribution point existed in a country with limited government control and active armed conflicts. Traditional law enforcement operations were impossible. Alternative approaches would be required. The Lebanon technical advisor presence was protected by proxy forces with substantial military capabilities. Direct confrontation could trigger regional escalation. Secret Elite developed an operational concept that addressed each challenge systematically. The strategy focused on 3 objectives: intercept the current shipment before delivery, dismantle the network's infrastructure outside Iran, and create conditions that would prevent reconstitution. Naval assets from 7 nations began repositioning under cover of routine exercises. Intelligence assets in multiple countries activated surveillance of network personnel. Financial investigators prepared asset seizure orders for accounts in 11 jurisdictions. Diplomatic teams engaged with governments whose cooperation would be essential. 14 days before the scheduled shipment arrival, Secret Elite confirmed that all preparation was complete. The cargo vessel had departed Iranian waters and was transiting toward the Suez Canal. Satellite surveillance tracked its progress continuously. Naval vessels were positioned along potential routes. Boarding teams were ready for deployment. But the network's counter-surveillance detected unusual activity. Intercepted communications revealed that network leadership suspected increased monitoring. They implemented contingency protocols. The cargo vessel altered course. Additional vessels were activated to serve as decoys or alternative transport. The shipment schedule was accelerated. Instead of 19 days, the components would reach their distribution point in 11 days. Secret Elite had less than 2 weeks to execute operations that had been planned for a month. What happened next demonstrated the power of international cooperation against state-sponsored proliferation. Within 48 hours, all 15 operational commands confirmed readiness for accelerated execution. Naval deployments were adjusted. Ground operations were advanced. Intelligence assets confirmed updated target locations. The operation would unfold in 3 phases: maritime interdiction, network disruption, and financial dismantlement. At exactly 400 hours Greenwich Mean Time, Secret Elite launched Operation Desert Serpent. The maritime phase began in the Red Sea. The primary cargo vessel had transited the Suez Canal and was proceeding south toward the Horn of Africa. A multinational naval task force established a cordon that left no passage unmonitored. The vessel's captain was ordered to halt for inspection under international maritime security protocols. The captain initially refused, claiming the cargo was legitimate commercial goods protected by international shipping law. He was informed that intelligence confirmed the presence of sanctioned military components. Continued refusal would result in forcible boarding. After 3 hours of negotiation, the captain permitted inspection. What boarding teams discovered exceeded intelligence estimates. The vessel carried guidance systems for 75 missiles as expected, but additional containers held components that had not been identified in pre-operation intelligence. Mobile launcher platforms, radar systems, and encrypted communication equipment. The shipment would have provided recipients with not just missiles, but integrated strike capabilities. The cargo was seized. The vessel was diverted to a port where comprehensive forensic examination would document every component. The crew was detained for interrogation. Several provided information about the network's operations in exchange for consideration. Simultaneously, a decoy vessel was intercepted near the Strait of Hormuz. This vessel carried a smaller cargo of missile components, apparently intended to reach recipients even if the primary shipment was intercepted. The Revolutionary Guard had anticipated potential interdiction and prepared backup delivery. The backup was now also in custody. A third vessel, identified through intelligence gathered from the first interception, was tracked to a port in Eritrea. Local authorities, coordinating with secret elite through diplomatic channels, seized the vessel and its cargo before it could be offloaded. The components were destined for proxy forces operating in the Arabian Peninsula. Within 72 hours, 3 vessels carrying components for over 120 missiles were secured. The maritime phase had exceeded all objectives, but the operation was only beginning. The network disruption phase targeted infrastructure across 6 countries simultaneously. In Dubai, authorities coordinated with secret elite to raid the trading company headquarters. The operation required careful diplomatic preparation. UAE officials were briefed on the full scope of the network's activities and the implications for regional security. The raid occurred at dawn. Company executives were arrested before they could destroy records or alert other network nodes. Computer systems were seized intact. Financial records revealed the complete structure of transactions over 5 years. Payments received, shipments coordinated, bribes distributed, and profits laundered. 17 individuals were arrested in Dubai. The evidence would support prosecutions that would send a clear message about the consequences of facilitating proliferation. In Malaysia, the transshipment hub was dismantled through coordinated Port Authority action. Intelligence had identified specific warehouses and container yards used by the network. Malaysian Special Operations Forces secured these facilities simultaneously. Customs officials who had facilitated illegal transshipments were arrested. Port records were seized. The evidence revealed that the hub had processed over 200 illicit shipments in 5 years. Components had been redirected to destinations across the Middle East, Africa, and South America. The network's Malaysian operations had generated profits exceeding $50 million. 23 individuals were arrested. The transshipment capability was eliminated. In Turkey, operations targeted the logistics network that moved components overland. Turkish intelligence had identified trucking companies and individual drivers who transported illicit cargo. Simultaneous raids across 4 cities secured vehicles, warehouses, and personnel. Some drivers claimed ignorance of their cargo's nature. Others clearly knew exactly what they were transporting. 31 individuals were detained. Vehicles containing missile components in transit were seized. Routes that had moved weapons toward conflict zones were severed. The Sudan distribution point presented the most complex operational challenge. The facility existed in a region where government authority was contested. Armed groups provided security. Direct assault would risk significant casualties and potential regional destabilization. Secret elite coordinated an alternative approach. Intelligence assets identified key personnel who managed the distribution operation. These individuals were tracked when they traveled outside the protected facility. Over a period of 3 days, 7 key figures were detained in neighboring countries where they had traveled for meetings or personal business. With leadership eliminated, the distribution operation collapsed. Remaining personnel abandoned the facility. Local authorities, supported by international forces, secured the site and documented its contents. The evidence revealed the full scope of distribution activities. Missiles and components had been provided to groups across 3 conflict zones. Technical manuals, training materials, and communication records documented the relationship between the Revolutionary Guard and its proxy recipients. In Lebanon, operations require the most careful calibration. Direct action against Revolutionary Guard technical advisors would trigger retaliation from proxy forces. The political consequences could include regional conflict. Alternative approaches were implemented. Intelligence regarding the advisors' activities was shared with international bodies responsible for sanctions enforcement. Travel restrictions were imposed on identified individuals. Financial channels they used were closed. Their operational effectiveness was degraded without direct confrontation. The technical advisor presence would continue, but their ability to support missile operations was significantly diminished. The financial dismantlement phase completed the operation's objectives. Investigators had mapped the network's financial infrastructure over months of preparation. Bank accounts in 11 countries held funds used for component procurement, bribery, and profit distribution. Shell companies in 7 jurisdictions provided commercial cover. Real estate holdings worth hundreds of millions had been purchased with proliferation profits. Asset seizure orders were executed simultaneously across all jurisdictions. Over $850 million in assets were frozen or seized. Bank accounts were closed. Properties were confiscated. Shell companies were dissolved. The financial infrastructure that had sustained 5 years of proliferation was destroyed in a single day. The message to other potential proliferators was clear. The international community would pursue illicit funds wherever they were hidden. Consider what was prevented by Operation Desert Serpent. Components for over 120 ballistic missiles never reached their intended recipients. These weapons would have been aimed at cities, military bases, and critical infrastructure across the Middle East. Each missile represented potential mass casualties. The network's dismantlement prevented future transfers that intelligence estimated would have included components for an additional 200 missiles over the following 3 years. Proxy forces that had anticipated enhanced strike capabilities would need to operate with existing, less capable weapons. Regional conflicts that had been intensifying as proxy forces gained missile capabilities would now stabilize. Populations that had faced increasing missile threats could experience reduced danger. The strategic balance that had been shifting toward proxy forces would rebalance. The intelligence gathered during the operation revealed connections to other proliferation networks that had not been previously identified. Additional operations, building on Desert Serpent's success, would disrupt these networks over the following months. The financial disruption sent shockwaves through illicit networks worldwide. Front companies that had considered facilitating proliferation observed the consequences. Banks that had turned blind eyes to suspicious transactions implemented enhanced scrutiny. The cost of proliferation activities increased significantly. 84 individuals were arrested across 8 countries. The charges include sanctions violations, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy to support terrorism. Many will spend decades in prison. The network's leadership in Tehran observed their external infrastructure collapse. Years of careful construction were destroyed in days. Profits that had funded future operations were seized. Personnel who had managed external activities were imprisoned. They will attempt to rebuild. They always do. But the barriers to proliferation have been raised. The cost has been increased. The time required to reconstitute will allow other interventions. Secret Elite operates in shadows so that others can live in light. The civilians in cities that will not be struck by ballistic missiles will never know how close they came to danger. The families who will not receive news that their loved ones were killed in missile attacks will never know about the weapons that were intercepted. The children who will grow up in regions where missile threats have diminished will never know about Operation Desert Serpent. This is the nature of Secret Elite operations. Success is measured in missiles that are not launched, in cities that are not struck, in casualties that do not occur, in conflicts that do not escalate. The threat has not been eliminated. The Islamic Republic continues to develop missile technology. Proxy forces continue to receive some support through channels that have not been disrupted. The work of preventing proliferation never ends. But on this day, the barriers held. The weapons did not reach their destinations. The civilians who would have died in future attacks will instead live their lives. And somewhere in a city that remains at peace, a family goes about their daily routine. They do not think about missile threats. They do not consider the weapons that might be aimed at their homes. They simply live, trusting that someone is working to keep them safe. That trust is not misplaced. How many operations like this happen without public knowledge? How many missiles have been intercepted before they could kill? Should Secret Elite have expanded authority to prevent proliferation before networks grow to this scale? The world is more dangerous than most people realize. Nations and groups actively seek weapons capable of mass casualties. The barriers that prevent their acquisition are maintained by constant vigilance and occasional intervention. In the shadows, Guardians work to ensure that weapons of war do not reach those who would use them against the innocent. They ask for no recognition. They seek no fame. They want only to prevent the suffering that missile attacks inflict on civilian populations. Subscribe to Secret Elite for more stories of heroic interventions that saved lives the world never knew were at risk. Where proliferation threatens peace, Secret Elite is there, stopping weapons before they can claim victims. The shadows protect us all.